The judge is expected to do a roll call on these Thursdays. I'd like to finish the judge.
It's got to be a big jury.
She said she's already working on that. But we're going to put it on, let's say, late to 4 business days. And she wants her call on Thursday. Then she says, well, if you guys get it done by, let's say, midday, Wednesday, you don't need to do it.
I think the vicious, especially the jury. If we can do that,
So essentially, it's part of the apprehension. Just say that.
a lot of the same stuff.
Thank you. Be seated. You swear the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, consider yourself under oath.
Morning, officer. Would you please tell us your full name and spell your last name?
Detective Todd A. Sinsley, S-I-N-S-L-E-Y,
And how are you presently employed?
City of Akron Police Department,
And how long in total have you been an Akron police officer?
14 years.
And presently, what is your assignment within the Akron Police Department?
I'm a detective in the street narcotics uniform detail, narcotics unit.
And that unit is sometimes referred to as a snub unit.
Yes, sir.
And generally, what is the duties and responsibilities of the snub unit?
We investigate street level to mid-level, even sometimes higher street level dealing, investigate drug complaints. I'm primarily in a UC undercover role.
Can you just point that right at
Not
you
coming
there?
through.
And Detective, how long have you been employed in that capacity?
4 years.
And prior to that, what type of role did you have in the police?
I spent 10 years on the 311 patrol shift, working mostly west side of Akron.
I'm going to take you back to November 16th, early morning hours. Were you working at that time?
I was on my way home from an extra job at Akron Metropolitan Housing Authority.
And when you say an extra job, what does that mean?
AMHA, Akron Metropolitan, pays us to work the buildings and the developments. The Akron Metropolitan Housing Authority has a secondary employment. I was leaving Lauer, which is up on North Howard Street, and I was heading west to my home.
Is that a regular duty that officers engage in?
Yes, sir.
Had you worked earlier that day, if you recall?
I did.
And what shift were you working at that time, if you were working a shift?
Our normal shift is 1 to 11, and then I would have worked 11 to 2 at AMHA.
So your shift or your work duties at AMHA were over and you were heading home at that time?
Yes, sir.
And are you driving your own vehicle or a police cruiser?
I have a take-home cruiser.
And tell us what occurred at that time.
At about, it was like 1:58, 1:59, somewhere in that ballpark at 2 o'clock in the morning. I heard a call go out for shots fired at a bar on East Market Street, and then shortly after they put it out as a signal 21, which was an officer down.
Now routinely, you had just heard a call of shots fired, would you have responded to the scene?
If I was close, I would have, but where I was on Memorial Parkway at Euler at the time that call went out.
And as a reference, where is that in relationship to the Papa Don's pub?
Several miles north and west, probably about a 10-minute drive.
When you heard signal 21 though, as a result of that, how did you respond?
I made a U-turn and proceeded lights and siren to East Market Street. Took me about 5 minutes to get over there.
And you're by yourself in your cruiser, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And tell us what happened when you arrived on the scene.
Initially, some patrol cars had made a traffic stop on another vehicle on East Market Street near Azteca, which is right down the street, that they believe may or may not have been involved in the shooting. I stopped by them to check and make sure they were okay, and then I proceeded to Papa Don's where the shooting had occurred.
And as far as your cruiser, did you get out and park it in a specific area?
I did. Once I got to Papa Don's, I parked it on East Market Street in front of Papa Don's.
And what happened next?
I saw Officer Edsel and his dog were beginning to do a track. I had worked with canines as a decoy, so I'm familiar with the tracking and the procedures that he was going to be doing during that track.
So, throughout the word decoy, what do you mean by that?
Basically, you have decoys in our department that act as suspects or bad guys to train the dogs and keep them up to the requirements for the state. So I would act as a decoy and help train those dogs.
And you see Officer Edsel, did you indicate he's heading out at that time? Or?
He was getting ready to go into a ravine, which is right behind Papa Don's, like a canal. And he was going to take his dog, so I was going to go with him.
Tell us about your involvement from that point on.
Officer Edsel and I and the dog proceeded along this ravine and like a runoff area almost is what it looked like. Had boulders on the side. We followed that as far as we could follow it north and east until we came to a large chain link fence with barbed wire over top of it, and we stopped there, came back out.
Officer, I'm going to put here on the television what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 19 and identified as an aerial photo of that area. If you need to approach, you can. We're going to see.
No, I can see it.
In regard to State's Exhibit 19, do you recognize this area?
Yes.
And what do you see in the photograph?
That's the aerial view of Papa Don's in the parking lot, and then the off-ramp from 76 West, and then a railroad like depot that's right there north of it.
In regards to Papa John's, then, would that be in the lower left-hand corner of the photo?
Yes, sir.
Zoom in then. And it's actually listed as Papa John's Pub
Correct.
on the photograph. Now, you mentioned a ravine. Can you see the ravine in a close-up portion of the photo?
Yes, it kind of looks like a creek or a river that's running.
That is kind of right.
Yes, sir, with the green bushes around it.
And in regards to the roads that we can see it on this photograph, what roads would you identify?
East Market Street is the road running east and west right in front of Papa Don's, and then the Market Street off-ramp is running right there where you're pointing.
This would be the off-ramp,
Yes, sir.
and there's even, an arrow there listing that it would be running in that direction. Is that
Yes, sir.
correct? And as to the area that you were discussing, that you had gone along with Officer Edsel, which area was that?
We were along the canal, directly behind Papa Don's. We were down inside of that, following it till where you see like almost looks like a bridge going across.
Over here?
Right around in there is where we ran into a fence. I think it's to protect the railroad depot that's there, but it has barbed wire and wouldn't let us go any farther.
What happened next then?
Edsel took his dog and was going to go check another area. I went back to my cruiser, which was in front of Papa Don's, and then I got in my cruiser and I was going east on Market, and then I went reverse the traffic up the off-ramp for 76 West.
So you're going on the off-ramp?
Yes, correct. Reverse the traffic with my lights on, and I'm spotlighting this field that you can see is like a triangular shape up there to the right of the picture.
That would be this triangle shape here?
Yes, sir.
And once again, you're on the off-ramp, facing the opposite direction in your cruiser, correct?
Correct. I'm on the left shoulder, off the road, but I'm basically on the off-ramp.
Now, as far as the traffic on I-76, have there been any steps to regulate traffic at that time?
Not at that point.
And when you say you spotlighted the area, what do you mean by you spotlighted?
The cruiser I had a spotlight like most police cruisers, and I was using it to see if I could see anything in that field. At the time, the grass in that field was probably knee-high or less, but it was overgrown like most highway off-ramps that you see.
I mean, does that field serve any purpose as far as pedestrian traffic, vehicle traffic, any purpose whatsoever?
No, sir, it's overgrown.
What happened next?
As I'm going up the hill, reverse the traffic on the off-ramp, I see Edsel and his dog making their way along that bush line that you can see north of that triangle. Him, the dog, and one other officer were following that line, and it looked like they had been on a track. I was spotlighting and I observed what I believed to be a trash bag originally. It was a black piece of paper or material that I seen fluttering in the breeze. And I stopped the cruiser to get out to go inspect it, thinking maybe a suspect had dropped that as they ran. But as I got closer, I observed Mr. Ivery sticking his head up, looking towards Officer Edsel as he was walking the bush line. And so I got on the radio and told Edsel, hey, stop right there and look back towards me where I'm shining the light.
In regards to that area, but for your lighting, is there any other additional lighting in that field?
No, sir. There's a light down Market Street at the off-ramp, but nothing in the middle.
Does that light at the end of the ramp, does that project any lighting onto that?
No, it's very dark over there.
And so you see what you believe to be an object, not a person, from when you're inside your cruiser.
Correct.
You get out of the cruiser and start approaching it. At this time, are you being cautious?
I am. I believe the suspect's still armed. We know there's multiple shots fired and multiple people that had been hit. So my thinking was that we would use the dog to try to make this apprehension, believing that the suspect would still be armed at that point.
And when you indicate you see an individual, how do you know that it's an individual as opposed to an object at that time?
Because after I get out of the cruiser and I start walking towards the object, Mr. Ivery put his head up and I could actually see his face looking back towards Edsel. And I mean, just his head, I mean, you could just see his head pop up out of the grass looking towards Edsel. And my one concern is that he's getting ready to ambush Edsel. The other concern is that he's still armed, so I need to let Edsel know where he's at and get him over to where we're at.
Do you recall that his head remained up looking, or did it?
No, it was he would pop up and look and then go back down, pop up, look, go back down, waiting to see how far Edsel was going to go past. Because at that point, Officer Edsel already passed by where he was hit.
And how far are you from the individual when viewing that?
When I see that it's a person, it's probably 40 yards.
What happened next?
I got on the radio, told Edsel to come towards me, said that I had a suspect in the field. Edsel started moving towards him. Edsel, when he got close enough that he was about to prepare to release the dog, he began to announce, Akron Police, show your hands, I'm going to release the dog. Mr. Ivery just tucked his arms under him, got down in the grass and acted like we couldn't see him. The dog was released. And as Bronson closed on Mr. Ivery, I began to run towards him.
And when you say, what position is he specifically in at the time the dog was released as far as Mr. Ivery?
Fully prone with his hands under him. Except for when he pops up, he'll get into like a half push-up.
So the dog is released. When the commands were made, did you see any movement by Mr. Ivery?
Just him tucking back down in. He was in like a little dip in the field, so once he tucked back down in, it was hard to see him.
Was there any verbal response from Mr. Ivery at that time?
No, sir.
What happened then after the dog was released?
The dog grabbed Mr. Ivery by his leg, and he tried to get up and was kicking at the dog. So I was still running at him at that point, and as I'm running, I didn't even stop. I just kicked Mr. Ivery in the face as I got close to him.
What happened next?
I spun around, put my knee on his back, and began to try to grab for his hands, screaming for him to show me his hands. Edsel closed in as well, and then I believe one other officer. I delivered several blows to Mr. Ivery's face and back of his head, and eventually we were able to get him handcuffed.
Was he resistant when you were actually in physical contact with him, as far as getting his hands?
He just wouldn't let us have his hands, and our concern at that point is that he's still armed, so that's my number one thing, is getting his hands out from under him and getting him in cuffs.
Now, were you privy to the radio dispatch that was going out during that time period?
Bits and pieces of it, because it was going out on multiple channels, and it was chaotic, so we were getting some information, but some of it was then being corrected at the same time.
Do you recall receiving any radio information that a gun had been located at this time?
I never heard that, no.
Would it have mattered as far as your approach if you had heard that?
No.
Why is that?
We did get information that an officer had been involved in the shooting, so even if I would have heard a gun had been recovered, I would have assumed that it could have been the officers as well as the defendant, so I would have still assumed that the person's armed until I could prove otherwise.
After Mr. Ivery is handcuffed, what occurred next?
We requested medical treatment for him, and I began to search him for weapons and whatever else he had on his person at the time.
And do you recall, did you locate anything on his person?
I did. He had a wad of money in his right front pocket that I removed and put on the ground next to him, and a phone that was also put next to that money.
Is it a phone? What type of phone?
A smartphone. I'm not sure what brand.
And the money, was it, do you recall if it was loose or was it in a wallet?
It was bundled up and folded over in his right front pocket.
Did you continue to keep that money, or did another officer then?
I set it on the ground next to him to keep searching. I basically put everything that I found on him in a pile next to him, and then I believe Officer Jackson retrieved that and held on to it so it wasn't laying in the field.
What then happened to Mr. Ivery?
Initially put him in a patrol wagon to wait for a med unit because the med units were having difficulty finding where we were at. He was put in a wagon, and then once the med unit was there, we transferred him from the wagon to the med unit where he then was transported to the hospital.
Were you personally involved in any of those transports?
No, sir.
And during the brief time you had interaction with Mr. Ivery, did he make any statements to you during that time, or did he say anything to anybody?
He never made a statement or a sound during any of it. And even when the dog was biting him, he never even said ow. Never made a noise.
When the dog did have a hold of him, was there movement by Mr. Ivery?
Just kicking. I mean, the natural reaction of a dog biting your leg, he was kicking at him, but not, and trying to get away from the dog, but
Is he kicking with a free leg?
yes, trying to get loose.
No further questions.
Officer Tinsley, if I ask you a question,
Sinsley?
it's a little, I'm sorry, sir.
Sinsley's not.
Sinsley.
Yes, sir.
If I ask you a question that you don't understand, you're free to ask me for repeat. Fair enough?
Yes, sir.
All right. In terms of radio traffic that night, there's a lot of radio traffic that night with respect to searching for Mr. Ivery.
Yes, sir.
All right. Do you remember hearing Officer Crockett during the radio traffic?
Crockett was on the radio off several times, yes.
All right. Did you hear that Crockett had found a weapon?
No, sir.
In terms of when you're searching this field, you see this, let's call it a black colored object, is that correct?
Something black fluttering, yes, sir.
Perfect. This object, is it moving around?
Just the material itself was, like it was a garbage bag or a piece of paper.
And you see a head pop up and you recognize it as a human,
Yes.
all right? And you then tell Officer Edsel to bring the dog back toward where that human was laying.
Correct.
Was Mr. Ivery lying face down?
Yes.
He wasn't moving?
He was he's lifting his head up.
That was it. The rest of his body wasn't moving.
Yeah, I couldn't see the rest of his body.
Was he making any type of aggressive moves toward you?
He didn't know that I was watching him, but no.
When Officer Edsel approached the dog, did he make any aggressive moves toward that officer?
Once the dog got to him, he did, yeah. Tried to kick the dog off and get up.
Prior to that, though, did he attempt to get up and run?
No, he attempted to hide back in that swallow.
While he's lying on the ground, is he being given any type of command?
Prior to the dog being released, yes.
Right? And when is it a typical police command when you come upon a suspect that you believe to be in a violent situation, is it typical to order someone to lie down?
Yes,
And Mr. Ivery is already lying down, is that correct, sir?
he is.
All right. The one thing you're not sure about, though, is his hands or what may be in his hands.
Correct.
Ultimately, you found no weapon on him, is that correct, sir?
No, sir.
You run up toward this human being. You don't see a weapon, though, do you?
No.
You don't see any aggressive moves toward you?
Towards
Right,
me?
sir?
No, sir. He doesn't know I'm watching.
Okay. He doesn't make any aggressive moves toward Officer Edsel, the dog, does he?
No.
Right. And you say you run up, and now you've heard at this point in time a signal 21, is that correct?
Yes.
Signal 21 means effectively officer down, officer in trouble.
Yes.
Okay. So do you know if it's Officer Winebrenner at that point?
I have no knowledge of the officer involved.
But you know there is an officer that's been wounded or shot or in big trouble.
No, because there was conflicting statements on the radio about whether an officer had actually been involved. All we knew is that it was possible that an officer had been injured.
But signal 21 you did hear.
Correct.
All right. And signal 21 in your vocabulary means officers in trouble,
Yes.
possibly hurt.
Yes.
Okay. So your adrenaline's flowing?
Not by then. I've been doing the job enough that I can control myself.
Okay. I think you indicated that you ran toward what turned out to be Mr. Ivery,
Yes.
and you kicked him in the head.
Yes.
And do officers typically wear a boot-type shoe?
Yes.
Okay. Like a combat boot?
Kind of.
All right. And what's your height and weight, officer?
6 foot, 225.
And then they communicated that you were trying to get to see his hands, I believe. Is that
Correct.
correct? You haven't seen any weapon this time?
No.
He hasn't made any aggressive move toward you. Is that correct?
Correct.
He's trying to get the dog off his leg at this point in time.
He's trying to escape at that point in time, but yes.
And then you begin to punch him several times in the head and the face.
Yes.
Did you believe, or did you make out a report that this object or human being laying in the field may have passed out?
Yes.
So, you're running at this thing fairly quickly?
I don't understand.
You're running at this object laying in the field fairly quickly?
Oh, yes.
All right. And you believe that person may have passed out?
As I'm running to him?
Yes.
No. That's not what my report said.
All right. Nevertheless, you're running toward this thing, and then you kick Mr. Ivery in the head.
Yes.
Your Honor, thank you.
No further questions.
All right, thank you, officer.
Thank you.
Officer Jared Jackson.
You swear the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes, I do.
All right, consider yourself under oath and have a seat right there. point that actually at yourself, and remember to keep your voice up.
Okay.
Hi, can you give us your first and last name, please?
Derek Jackson.
And just spell your first and last name for the court reporter.
Derrick Jackson.
And you're employed with the Akron Police Department?
Yes.
And you're a patrol officer?
Yes.
How long have you been employed as a patrol officer with APD?
About a year and 8 months now.
And back in November of 2014, how long had you been working as a police officer?
9 months.
And just give the jury some background on your training, please.
I completed the police academy, and then I did 7 weeks with our training department here in the city of Akron, and then 16 weeks with a field training officer.
Were you still with your field training officer on November 16th, 2014?
No.
And the field training officer, what is that?
It's a senior officer in the department who's assigned to a new officer to help him learn how to actually do the job.
So you're usually with a field training officer for about, what, 6 months?
Yes.
All right, I want to ask you then some questions about the call you received November 16th, 2014. Were you working on that night, early morning hours?
Yes.
And what shift were you working?
The Trick 4 shift, the 7 p.m. to 3:30 in the morning shift.
Okay. And did you respond to a call at 1891 East Market Street in Akron, Summit County, Ohio?
Yes.
And you recall the nature of the call was a signal 21?
Yes, it was.
Did it come out as that?
At first, it came out as a shooting, and then it was told to be an officer-involved shooting, and it became a signal 21.
All right, so at first it's coming out as a shooting at a pub, Papa Don's pub.
Yes.
Is that correct? And were you alone or with a partner that night?
I was working all by myself that night.
By yourself? Okay. And a prisoner?
Yes.
All right. I should ask, obviously, if you guys are on duty, you're all in uniform?
Yes.
Where do you respond to the actual scene of Papa Don's pub?
I didn't actually go to the park on the pub. By the time I got over to the area, they already gave out a description of the suspect, and I assisted in the search.
Assisted in the search, okay. Where did you begin assisting in the search? You're talking about the search for the shooter?
Yes.
Where did you begin that search yourself?
I began on East Market Street between about Cyberlin and Maslin, I think it was. And then I moved more towards East High School.
Are you in a cruiser at this point?
Yes.
And why are you searching in that area?
Because that's right outside of where the pub is. So I didn't know how far the suspect had got.
Hold on, like, toward you a little bit. Yeah. All right, sorry. So you're searching in that area by East High School.
Yes.
Did you stay there to continue your search there?
I was there for approximately 10 minutes, and then I went back towards East Market Street.
Are you listening at this point to, in all these kind of cases, are you listening to dispatch relaying information to you as you're searching?
Yes, I am.
Did you hear during that period of time, after you arrive on scene and when you're searching, that there was a vehicle that had left the Papa Don's pub and could possibly be involved in the shooting?
Yes, I did.
And did you respond to that vehicle, or did you look for that vehicle?
Yes, when I heard the dispatch say the vehicle was possibly involved, I looked up and that vehicle was right in front of me. So I stopped that vehicle and caught out the plate, realized that the person driving the vehicle was not who we were looking for.
And that's based on the description that was called out of what the shooter looked like?
Yes.
What did you do after that?
After that, I released the vehicle and headed back east to continue looking for the shooter.
Where do you direct your search at that point?
It was shortly after that point when I heard the K9 unit call out that his dog had a scent, and I went there to help him search there.
And approximately, you said you actually met up with the K9 officer?
Yes.
Officer Etzel?
Yes.
Bronson? We have a map up here that we can use a little bit, you can see it, see if you can do it next. Actually, I'll take it down and show it to you. Point this out first. Take a look at that and let me know if you recognize that.
Yes.
And it's the map of the area we're talking about here, Papa Don's Pub?
Yes.
Surrounding area? Okay. So when you meet up with Officer Etzel and Kenan Officer Bronson, where would that be approximately? I looked at the map up here on the overhead 19.
It would be right off the expressway. It's where the off-ramp for the expressway and East Market Street meet.
Okay, so my point is that now?
Yes.
What do you do at that point?
I follow the canine and his handler down to there's a creek bed that runs alongside of the ramp. I follow them down there to help search there.
And at some point, you actually, I think you guys kind of call up your search there, or at least move out of that culvert area.
Yes.
And up along the exit ramp. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is.
And here, I'm going to like an open field area. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
What happens when you get up there? You're still following the canine unit?
The canine unit had gone ahead of me and was going along the tree line in the field there. I was still up by the ramp looking down in the creek area to see if we could see him there.
What was the lighting like there?
At which part, ma'am?
I'm sorry, at the, as you're walking, as you're continuing, did you continue up the on-ramp, this area?
Yes, I do.
What's the lighting like as you get back to this field?
When you get back towards the field, it was very, very dark. The lights weren't illuminating anything there.
Tall grass, I think, too?
Yes, it was.
What do you see happen then with, did you see Officer Sinsley? Let me ask you that first.
I did not see him.
You're basically following Officer Etzel at that point?
Yes, I was.
What happens after that?
As I'm looking down in the creek bed, I hear someone on the radio say, "Hey Jeff, turn to your right." He's laying down in the field. And I looked up, trying to flash right up there, and I could see the suspect laying down, face down in the field.
Okay. Do you approach that area then?
Yes, I began to run towards the suspect, yelling for him to show his hands, and then I seen the dog be let loose.
So when you're running towards the suspect who's in the field, can you describe his position in the field, what you saw?
He was laying face down. I couldn't see his hands. I believe his hands were tucked under his body, and that's all I could see then.
So as you're running towards the suspect in the field, you yourself are yelling for him to show his hands?
Yes, I was.
So did you announce yourself after the police, show your hands?
I didn't announce myself. I just started yelling, show your hands, several times.
Do you hear Officer Etzel giving commands like that?
I heard several people yelling. I couldn't tell you who.
Okay. So there are a few officers that are giving verbal commands for the suspect to show his hands?
Yes.
Do you hear other officers announcing that this is Akron police?
Yes.
And then I think you said, did you have your firearm drawn at some point here too?
I did.
And why was that?
Because at the time I didn't know if the suspect was still in possession of the firearm that he used in the shooting.
Do you get up to the suspect before or after Kenan Bronson made his apprehension?
I approached the suspect after the dog had his bite.
After Kenan Bronson bit the suspect on his right leg, you run up on the suspect at that point?
Yes.
And what is the suspect's reaction?
When I seen the canine get his bite, I heard a yell from the suspect. He rolled over briefly, and then he rolled back over to his stomach, and I jumped on top of him and trying to get his hands out from under his body, telling him to give me his hands, and he was still had his hands drawn up under his body.
Okay, so there's actually some movement where from the stomach being on the side, is that fair?
Yes.
But then back onto the stomach?
Yes, there was.
And at any point, as you're approaching him or as you actually get up to the suspect, are his hands visible?
No.
What did you do at that point? You said you kind of got on his back?
Yes, I had one hand pushed down on his back, trying to pull his hands out from under his body with my right arm. I couldn't get it, so I began to give him strikes to his right side until I was able to get his hands freed.
When you say you're pulling on his, you said his arm?
Yes.
Why couldn't you get his arm free?
He had his arms pinched down under his body, and the only place I was able to grab was around his bicep area.
So he's physically resisting you pulling his arms
Yes.
free? You did then grab one of his arms, I believe it was his left arm, and place it into a handcuff.
Yes.
Where was his other arm then, once you got that left arm free?
Once I had his left arm free and the handcuff, his right arm was still tucked up under his body.
So he's still not giving up the other arm?
He's still not giving me his arm.
Some other officers arrive, right?
Yes.
And are you able to then, with assistance, physically pull his left arm out to get a handcuff?
I already had his left arm. It was his right arm that we were able to pull out and get in the other handcuff.
Okay. After the apprehension, were you involved in what's called, I guess, a search incident to arrest, or searching a suspect for any other weapons or anything like that?
I was not the physical officer who actually searched him. I was standing there while the search was being done.
And on his person, no gun was found. Is that fair?
Not that I know of.
Sorry?
No.
Okay. And were you involved in tagging any potential evidence or items from the suspect after he was apprehended?
Yes.
And what items were taken from the suspect that you then later tagged into evidence?
There was a cell phone and some money.
And actually asked you the suspect later identified as Kenan Ivery?
Yes, he was.
Sitting in court today?
Yes, he is.
What were the items that you obtained from the suspect and tagged?
A cell phone and some cash money.
Okay. And do you recall how much money was found on him?
I believe it was $1,228.
Do you recall, I mean, is this all in a certain number of type of bills, do you recall?
I don't recall what type of bills it was.
Okay, but $1,228 just in cash?
Yes.
Is that in anything or just rolled up?
It was folded up.
And you took that in as you would with anything that could potentially be evidence or something found on a suspect, you yourself took that back to APD and entered it into basically the evidence vault that's there?
Yes, I did.
Same thing with the phone that was found on him?
Yes.
At any point during this apprehension or when the defendant is being searched, is he saying anything to you?
At one point, I recall him yelling for us to please help him. And then,
Let me ask you this. When did you find out that Officer Winebrenner had passed? Was it before or after the apprehension?
after,
After. Were you with the defendant so at that point handling, getting him EMS attention or anything like that?
yes, I was.
Okay. So during the apprehension, right afterwards, the officers that are dealing with the defendant don't know that Officer Winebrenner passed away yet?
We had not found out yet.
Were you present when then the defendant was loaded into a wagon and then EMS was called for him?
I was present when he was loaded into the wagon. At that point, I walked away.
Officer Jackson, I just wanted to, you had said when you were putting the folded over money or the wad of money into evidence, you knew the exact amount total, but you didn't know the denominations?
Yes, I did not know the actual bills.
Okay. Would that have been notated in the property report that you filled out for
Yes.
EPD?
Yes, it would.
I'm going to, would that refresh your recollection if I show that to you?
Yes.
So I'm going to hand you an evidence and found property report. Is that your report?
Yes, it is.
Okay, you just read through that and let me know if it refreshed your memory as to how much, sorry, the denominations that you were taken from the defendant and tagged into evidence.
Yes.
Okay. do you know what that is now? Could you state that for the jury, please?
There were 18 $1 bills, 3 $10 bills, 29 $20 bills, 6 $50 bills, and 3 $100 bills.
Officer Jackson, when this search is taking place, it's actually Officer Sinsley who's doing the physical search, correct?
I don't remember, sir. I don't remember actually reaching his pockets.
Say that again?
I do not remember actually reaching his pockets and items out.
Okay. You remember Officer Sinsley being there, correct?
Yes, I do.
And you know that Officer Sinsley just testified, correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And when you do this search, you're reaching, like you just said, you're reaching the people's pockets, correct?
Yes.
And in this case, there was a wad of money wrapped by a rubber band, I think, correct?
I can't remember if it was wrapped by a rubber banner.
Okay. There's also a cell phone taken out of his pocket, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. You can stay down. All right. We're going to go ahead and take our lunch break now, ladies and gentlemen. We'll give you until 1:45, so that's about an hour and 5 minutes or so. Remind you not to discuss this case amongst yourselves. Don't permit anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. Don't investigate this case in any fashion. Don't make any final decisions until you've heard all of the evidence. Go ahead and put those notes together. Look heads down and just wait in the jury room until Shane comes and releases you. All right? All rise. Stand up. Thank you.
Can I do the record? The case not connected.
Russell /